All right, so I'm Androniki Lagos, and I'll be talking to you this evening about a construct that we're calling the Food Guild, which is a hybrid, multi-stakeholder, and social franchise construct that's designed to advance economic security and power building among food-based microbusinesses. So I'm coming to this work as someone who is the daughter of food entrepreneurs, who is a food entrepreneur herself, who works with food entrepreneurs, many of whom are on this call. And so this is a labor of love and something that is really near and dear to my heart. So what's the big deal with microbusinesses? Why are we talking about food and microbusinesses? New York City's food economy supports over 40,000 businesses, and about 70% of those are micro businesses. So that's 5 or fewer employees approximately. This is a critical pathway for BIPOC and immigrant residents of New York City. And also, there's an emerging group of shared kitchens, not only here in New York, but nationally, that are recognizing the importance of supporting microbusinesses in this space. Here in New York, you have facilities at the Entrepreneur Space, Hot Bread Kitchen, Cypress Hills LDC, and at Flatbush Central Mangrove, where I work. But even with the support infrastructure that exists, there's still persistent challenges to stability, which are true across sectors, but specifically for businesses in the food sector, capital, market access, affordable workspace, all of the regulatory hurdles, contract navigation, and certifications, including MWBE. And we still are stuck in this place where competition is the name of the game instead of collaboration. So there's really no unified advocacy, and there's not a whole lot of working together in order to advance the microbusiness's position in the marketplace overall. This is an opportunity. I just want to highlight NYCHA entrepreneurs. I was hoping that some of our friends from NYCHA Reese would be here this evening. I'm not sure if they've made it in time, but within the NYCHA population, over 400,000 adults live there. And according to a recent report by the Center for an Urban Future, there are over 1,600 residents who reported some kind of business income in 2021. And that's both formal and informal businesses. And NYCHA Resident Economic Empowerment and Sustainability, or REES, has a food business pathways program that launched in 2015. Since that launch, they've had 271 graduates, and that's resulted in 187 registered businesses, all of which are micro. And still, even with this program, graduates still report a need for continued support and networks and additional capacity. And then catering and procurement is a huge area of opportunity. So in the US, broadly speaking, it's a 10.6 billion market as of 2022. New York spends $500 million and serves 230 million meals annually. And within that big picture, you have CUNY, New York City Health and Hospitals, and many other institutions that have a food procurement need and meal procurement need even within that. There are several things in the works, including, the Good Food Purchasing Policy, which is incredible. There's a local economies goal pushing to support local businesses in this procurement picture. And then there's also the New York City 10-year food policy plan that has goals related to, food hub to schools, and DFTA, which stands for Department for the Aging Kitchens. So there are so many things in the works. And as I mentioned before, we've got several people on this call who've done longstanding deep food work in Brooklyn and beyond. And so this is part of a much larger effort to really localize our food sector. So some key questions that were driving this inquiry, what could a solidarity economy model that centers micro-food businesses look like? How might we focus institutional community anchorage as a tool for building economic democracy in addition to local economic growth? And then what works now? They're all number one on my list. So some models, what were the foundations for thinking through this construct? Well, secondary cooperatives, so things like Ace Hardware and Organic Valley that generate supply chain power and amplify member marketing could be really instructive and important here. Social franchises such as Arizmendi Bakeries and Brightly Cleaning Cooperative, which is based in Brooklyn or founded in Brooklyn rather, through CFL, create replicable and turnkey brands and operating systems. Multi-stakeholder co-ops like Namaste Solar and East Bay are really strong in terms of unifying diverse stakeholder groups around a common community goal. And then, of course, anchor institution systems, which is a conversation that is far-reaching. Models like the Cleveland model or Evergreen Cooperatives model really help to demystify institutional markets and create access to high-volume contracts for increased stability. So we try to take all of these models and sort of look at how they fit together and complement one another. For the Food Guild, the core stakeholders here are extremely important. So everything from production to recruitment, operations, sales, and policy, each sort of have their own unique and in some cases overlapping stakeholder groups, but really looking at everything from the micro businesses that are producing food to the organizations that form the recruitment pipeline, who in the small business ecosystem supports with operations and is important in actually the functioning of a business, where sales can come from, where is that demand, and then also what sort of policies need to be in place in order to facilitate better working together to support microfood businesses. So I'm going to walk you through a model ecosystem and illustrative scenario and just kind of explain how we see this Food Guild fitting together, what are the commensurate pieces and how it all might work. So starting with the microfood businesses, we thought it would be important to just sort of take a look at natural aggregation points. So where do microfood businesses tend to cluster? And shared kitchen facilities, as I mentioned in the beginning, are one obvious place. So in this scenario, you have microfood businesses that come and license affordable space, become members of a shared kitchen facility, and are working in common production areas. So in these sort of spaces, they're receiving affordable production space, as I said, take advantage of cooperative purchasing services, some aggregated back-end services, so everything from accounting and tech to training and licensing, and other specialized technical assistance, depending on what those food businesses are trying to produce. And in this construct, we thought that a social franchise model would be important in terms of opening up access to institutional supply chains. So a social franchise here could be situated within the shared kitchen facility, and these microfood businesses could have an opportunity to opt in or have a share in that social franchise, which would be responsible for developing a brand that is producing catering or potentially other food products. Could serve as a regulatory umbrella, so holding all of those certifications and licensure, and be responsible for coordinating institutional sales. And as I mentioned before, it could be co-owned by the microbusinesses and other stakeholders, which we'll talk through in a moment. So this is sort of the core of the multi-stakeholder cooperative model here. You have the microfood business members that are situated in facility where the social franchise would be developed. Now, the institutions are an important stakeholder here, obviously. Their primary role would be to work in close partnership with the social franchise entity, which is situated with the microbusinesses, developing products and procure those products from the social franchise and offering ongoing guidance and partnership. So really working in close proximity with as a real partner in order to facilitate a new kind of relationship with these microbusinesses through the social franchise. And then the social franchise would sell the product to institutions, manage contracts and sales, and provide the meals and train folks on how to produce those meals. Then we have you have to excuse all the acronyms, the Business Support Organizations, Community-Based Organizations, NYCHA, so BSO, CBOs, NYCHA, that really form the referral pathway for microbusinesses to find this construct. So not only do they provide referrals, they also are, a source of supplemental networks and technical assistance that are really important for the survival of these microbusinesses. And they tend to have relationships with high barrier individuals and entrepreneurs that are working in, this highly accessible pathway. CDFIs are an extremely important stakeholder here, providing capital and credit to the microbusinesses themselves, as well as to the social franchise entity. UFCW, the Union of Food and Commercial Workers, is called out here as an important stakeholder. And I don't know that they are necessarily the only labor stakeholder, but they're ones that we've been in conversation with to talk through the model and really try to understand, what is possible. Because one thing that is true is that when it comes to job quality, when you're an entrepreneur or a micro business owner, your job quality tends to be very low because there's a great deal of work involved, and as I said before, not a ton of advocacy that's relevant to you. And typically, the labor orientation is worker versus owner, but what happens if the only worker is the owner? How do you start to unify those things? And so we see a role for UFCW as a close partner here, providing training and benefits to the microbusiness members. And also providing acting as an advocate to institutions that are part of this construct as well. We have hyperlocal growers. So New York City and particularly Brooklyn has a lot of hyperlocal agriculture. And of course, regional agriculture is super important here in New York State. And so we see a role for them as a stakeholder within this guild, supplying fresh produce to these facilities. And also, helping insofar as we're partners, helping support that connection to institutions as well, because there's already, a great deal of advocacy and movement toward getting local agriculture into institutions. But oftentimes, there are barriers that are difficult to overcome, whether they're price or regulatory or in terms of contracts. And so we see the guild potentially being a support in this as well. So this is sort of what the ecosystem looks like. These are the various players that we just walked through. But then, how do we sort of unify all of these folks in terms of common goal to build new relationships? And what we landed on was some sort of governing and coordination board that would be instructive here. So really creating a common table to practice economic democracy. So this is not just about, business being more efficient and breaking down barriers to business, but really, getting to the heart of what solidarity economy is, and that is building new kinds of relationships and a new orientation toward one another. So we see the development of a governing and coordination board as instrumental to achieving that end. And so when we look at the stakeholder map and we introduce the governing and coordination board, you'll see that we have multiple member classes. So basically every stakeholder group has its own member class that would then be represented on the governing and coordination board. And ideally, we could design this such that the social franchise entity is co-owned by in some form or fashion and governed by this board as well. So the trick here would be figuring out how to do that without overcomplicating everything. But the idea would be that it is all interconnected and it is a closed loop system. So while the microbusinesses are certainly first in line to be served by the social franchise, it would make sense that all of these entities have a stake in it, and what exactly that looks like still very much needs to be worked out. And so here's the full stakeholder map. So you can see what this ecosystem looks like with all of the myriad moving parts, all of the myriad participants and their relationship to one another. So just a quick note about sort of illustrating how this might operate. So microbusinesses would join a shared kitchen. From there, the guild social franchise provides, the umbrella brand, compliance, back-end systems, and the purchasing cooperative piece. And the social franchise and institution X would partner to develop the product to spec, and the social franchise holds the contract. From there, social franchise would train on the product execution and coordinate fulfillment, and those microbusiness members could opt into some percentage of the contract according to their capacity. The reason why we were very intentional about having some flexibility about what folks opt into or not is because people enter into building their own businesses so that they can have flexibility because they have a passion, because they have a vision. And so in no way is this intended to infringe upon that, but rather to provide a floor or some sort of springboard from which they can continue to build their own concepts. You might want to think of it as something sort of akin to like a fair trade floor. While those things are taking place, there's power building education, organizing, training going on with UFCW or, other labor partners. And then the guild stakeholders would be in the process of developing and convening that governance board for decision-making and coordination. The social franchise will work with CDFIs to close the invoice gap, which is a major hurdle, leveraging BSO and CBO members to support microbusiness members. And then all member classes will work through the governance board to continually improve the pipeline and then really, build shared goals and figure out how this community needs to continue to work together and become stronger in the interest of our local food economy. So for the Food Guild, at this point, what do we need? We need institutional partnership and planning. We need planning capacity, which equates to funding, and we need legal support or advisory in order to really understand how to best structure this. And in terms of commitments, for me personally, I am committing to convening the microbusiness stakeholders, which has already started to take place, and initiating the social franchise and multi-stakeholder cooperative planning, which is also just beginning. So it's an exciting time, very much looking forward to moving this out of class and into the real world, but we definitely need to get stakeholders activated and engaged.
Thank you so much, Androniki. And that last slide, just go back for 1 second. Okay. It's a great modeling of what both Androniki commits to and what is needed. Let me close the shared screen. Let me invite